So the House Minority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, is still having his battle with Speaker Pelosi over the selection of this committee to investigate what happened on January 6th in the insurrection at the Capitol. Now, his battle is now expanding now to a new old foe, Liz Cheney. She's involved in this now. Now, if you're wondering how this happened, it all began, first of all, when the battle came and Kevin McCarthy put forward his 5 picks, 2 of which Nancy Pelosi rejected, Jim Jordan and Jim Banks, because they're not based in reality and we already know the direction they would probably like to take on this panel. So enter Liz Cheney. So from the Hill, Speaker Nancy Pelosi tapped Cheney, who has blamed Trump for inciting the Capitol insurrection as her sole GOP pick for the special panel. Pelosi is also reportedly considering appointing a second Trump critic, Representative Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, to the January 6th Select Committee, another move that would infuriate Republicans. Kinzinger serves on both the Energy and Commerce Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee. So Cheney's also refused to step down from doing this panel because many Republicans would like her to reject this, considering the leader of the party in the House took down his 5. So they're insisting that the investigation into the causes of the deadly assault and the reason that the complex was not further fortified, that must go on, is what Liz Cheney is saying. So her participation has given Democrats a useful talking point that the probe is bipartisan. Now, first of all, before we can get further than that, I don't know, I had a thought at least when this article said it's a useful talking point that the probe is bipartisan. I'm not sure if this is one of those things that they were worried about a bipartisan look for it for a talking point, but more so they could have other people on because the objections were happening. Because I don't know if many people really wanted this to be bipartisan because they tried earlier. So at this point, when this select committee comes about, the bipartisan attempt already happened and it was already rejected. I feel like if we pose it that way, we're forgetting that the Republicans already had plenty of chances to make this bipartisan, but they just didn't do it. So the onus continues to be put on Democrats to do so. So before we get to how this battle is falling apart and also how McCarthy is responding to it, first off, what do you guys think about this approach?
I think the idea somehow that I think you make a good point when you talk about the fact that any real bipartisanship is a bridge too far in this Washington. I mean, the divisiveness, the hyper-partisan nature of Washington right now just doesn't permit it. So you have this one outlier in the Republican Party and Liz Cheney, who will participate in a committee that, and even it seems to me like the facts that will be reviewed by this committee are nakedly clear to begin with, for the most part. But what could actually be discovered along the way is those members of Congress who might have been in league with those actually who were part of that insurrection that day. So to that extent, and with some subpoena power, presumably, you might actually be able to uncover some new facts. But the bipartisan thing, I agree with you. It's a very thin hook on which to hang a talking point. And we all understand, yeah, she comes from the other side, Liz Cheney, the GOP side, but otherwise, this is this is likely to call it a partisan endeavor. Yeah, the whole thing was partisan on some level, but I see it as a very thin talking point. I saw that too, and I don't ascribe much credibility to that particular point.
So actually, you mentioned, Mark, some of those House Republicans that potentially could have been part of it. They're also pressuring the leader, McCarthy, to actually now punish or do something about Liz Cheney. Once again, as we know before, they already stripped her of her committee positions, at least her ranking as third most powerful Republican there in the House. So they've already done that earlier just because she was continuing to criticize President Trump and the way that he was handling things, which was in a different universe. So when asked about that, McCarthy did have this to say about whether or not they're gonna now go further to take her off of more committees that she's a part of. Let's see what she had to say.
About a few weeks ago, you said that I don't know in history where someone would go get their committee assignments from the speaker and expect for them to have them for the conference as well. Where are you right now as far as—
I'm right here.
As far as committee assignments are concerned with Cheney and potentially Adam Kinzinger?
Look, our main focus is making sure that we stop the runaway inflation the Democrats have caused. The idea of securing our borders, of making sure the crime that is rising in California throughout the entire nation because of defunding the police, that we stop all that. I understand from a standpoint that others could be busy on other things. I think it's a conference decision. The conference will look at it. Yes, ma'am.
Whenever politicians move on like that after they've answered a question and literally it feels like it's the same sentence, they go on to the next. It means they really don't want to continue talking about this. That's exactly what happened there. And also the deflection of the things that they're looking to focus on, as McCarthy said there, was the crazy inflation by Dems, the defund the police, which has caused a rise in crime across the country because police departments across the country have been defunded. No, they haven't. So whenever you have these kinds of deflections like that, you understand he really doesn't want to stand by this strong man position that he's now been his position's been put in by President Trump and following his orders. He's trying to make sure he still keeps the talking point that there are things going on that Democrats are destroying in this country. But I'm not going to do anything necessarily about Liz Cheney because then that would have too much attention on the infighting that's going on within my party. None of this has anything to do with policy. It has nothing to do with finding out what happened on January 6th, or in fact, really getting to the bottom of the people who were behind it, who wanted it to happen. It's more about making sure that there's a negative feeling towards the opposite party so they can win in 22. Nothing with anything else that has to do with the country.
100%. I mean, there is no Republican Party platform. There hasn't been for years, right? It's just like, old, crypt zombie, it's like a cutout letter of a ransom note. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. It's like Putin, put some letters together and then like Trump scrambled them and glued them down on the paper and was like, here's the platform. Mitch McConnell was like, looks good. Like that's literally all Republicans do. And so it's so funny to hear him be like, no, we're trying to focus on, inflation. What's our talking point again? Your talking point has been the COVID vaccine isn't real, and Mr. Potato Head needs to be avenged. Like those are, you know what party you're in? So it's interesting because obviously, I want Republicans who were not aiding and abetting and fanning the flames of the insurrection on a committee like this. So I do think it's good that Jim Jordan has been rejected by Nancy Pelosi. But on the other hand, you've got Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, and they're not saints, right? These people aren't saints, and if anything, they are going to validate this committee in a way that if Republicans were smart, they would say, yeah. Put Liz Cheney on the committee. Yeah, do that. Do Adam Kinzinger, because they're only going to go so far. They're not going to name names. They're not going to get in deep. They're not going to tie, actually investigate the ties between Mo Brooks, Andy Biggs, Representative Andy Biggs, Representative Paul Gosar, and all the ways that they helped create the Stop the Steal rally, and the ways that the Republican Party prepped and primed its base for violence, to say nothing of what Trump and Giuliani and others did. So it's interesting because once again, they shoot themselves in the foot because all Nancy Pelosi wants is sort of a little like going through the motions. Okay, but everyone's staying in power anyway. We won't look at the 14th Amendment, which basically says if you aid and abet insurrectionists, you're gone. They're not gonna go that far.
I think it's one of those things that honestly, I didn't thought of it that way. It kind of would be a good signal because again, I pointed out how this article pointed out that it says it's a good cover for Democrats. It might actually be a good cover for Republicans if they go with this. Because again, I love that point. Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, it's not like they're gonna completely sell off the entire party or expose them in every aspect for who they are. I don't really see that happening.
I just think that that's provocative as well. It hadn't occurred to me either, Francesca, that somehow by virtue of their participation in the committee, they actually might give some cover to Republicans. That said, I think you're also right when you point to the fact that Pelosi is, more of the same. I don't know what the result of the committee hearings, of the committee investigations. I just don't know what the results will be. As I was mentioning before, if it can uncover some new facts about those in league with the insurrectionists, all the better. Otherwise, again, I'm unclear as to where we're going because they're certainly not going to what you've suggested, which is the third rail, which is to, actually deal with the expulsion of some of their members.
Yeah.
I'll tell you where they're going, Mark. So the rank and file Republicans are pushing McCarthy to make sure that they kick Liz Cheney off of more committees. But the House Freedom Caucus, very conservative House Freedom Caucus, is also pushing that McCarthy remove Pelosi as speaker. Continue on from Politico. In a letter Friday, the far-right group asked McCarthy to file and bring up a privileged motion by July 31st to, quote, vacate the chair and end Nancy Pelosi's authoritarian reign as Speaker of the House. Their letter went on to say, Speaker Pelosi's tenure is destroying the House of Representatives and our ability to faithfully represent the people who we are here to serve. They write, Republicans under your leadership must show the American people that we will act to protect our ability to represent their interests. Jesus. One more part that they went through. The group, which signed the letter simply as House Freedom Caucus, not putting their names all of it, cited a series of other grievances against Pelosi that they argue represent, quote, unconstitutional changes, such as the proxy voting, insulting security measures like the metal detectors, and her decision to kick a member of the minority, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, off of her committees over dangerous conspiracy remarks and social media posts that she made before she was serving in Congress. So the reign of terror of Nancy Pelosi on the House needs to be ended by the minority leader, Kevin McCarthy, in a democratically held House. I'm not sure how that works. I mean, I don't know.
And that is a talking point. You want a talking point? There is a talking point. I mean, these are rallying cries to the base. This is the politics of the new America that actually does over time yield results and support. No one looks beyond the talking points. I mean, the inflation talking point, this talking point. I find these talking points, while flimsy and illogical, effective. You know, it becomes the new rallying cry for yet another news cycle.
Does this work? Sorry, because this is what I've always thought. You don't really have to, and this is why we're at the point where the Republican Party has zero agenda, zero principles, not even anything that they're really pushing for the next election. It's, you need a boogeyman. And no matter how many, honestly, non-progressive things that Nancy Pelosi has done that many Democrats and progressives don't like, they still find a way to attack her on things that don't really matter. There's so many, it's a fertile environment to talk about things that she's doing incorrectly, but of course, when you're on the side of those things that she's doing that are incorrect, you can't really attack those things. And also, if you don't have any policy, you have to just make a boogeyman. So if you
she's their Hillary Clinton,
yeah,
make no mistake about it. She is their Hillary Clinton, and it's, as I say, if you scream it from the rooftops long enough, it works.
Yeah, and by the way, Dr. Fauci is the next. You know, it's the next one. So anytime you mention the name Fauci, they're selling merchandise. If you mention the name Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, Dr. Fauci, it's whatever he just said, I'm against it. I'm gonna go vote. You know, Madison Cawthorn, or I think it's Madison Cawthorn, said we're gonna run and we're gonna win in 22 so that we can prosecute Fauci. That's why you wanna win in 22. Okay.
I mean, like we struggle with this exercise, but it is an important one to constantly remind ourselves of, which is if the shoe were on the other foot. If a group of left wingers stormed the Capitol and started going, Mitch McConnell, come out to play it, which sounds very fun, to be totally honest with you, and stalked lawmakers in their own chambers and had zip ties with them and had non-lethal weapons with them, right? And had and like defaced all kinds of like artifacts of democracy. Like imagine the Benghazi hearing, put that it's on steroids for the next 10 years, you're not hearing about it. This would be their 9/11. Like they would make such a big deal of it. And so I'm glad Pelosi's rejected, the two Republicans who were nominated who were like too far out there. I'm glad she knows what she's doing. Clearly, and she knows the move she has to make to also make her caucus happy as well, right? And Democrats happy as well. But in terms of a jaw on the floor, we're gonna turn this place over. We're gonna up and down, you've got Congress people disrespecting and senators disrespecting Capitol Police officers, not willing to shake their hands, not willing to honor their service. I mean, the degradation, and we just kind of have to, guess we'll try and pass an infrastructure bill as if this is a real government. It's insane. And so we really do feel like we're taking crazy pills here, but gotta imagine if this had been Democrats to Republicans, the amount that they would hold Democrats accountable for this violence.
And Democrats would be on board with it. Many would say, oh, this is horrible, or then be afraid if they were still trying to protect the party based off of what folks that supported them did. Then once Republicans got to pulling their hair out about it, they would definitely fall in the line because it would be bad PR. Let's just keep it real, that's how it is.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, Jayar. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.